Snow pressed against the farmhouse windows like a quiet accusation. Thomas Bennett stood just inside the door, his working gloves still on, breath slow, measured, the way a man breathes when panic would cost him more than cold ever could. Outside, the storm had erased the curved path that led from the barn to the house. Direction had vanished beneath white weight. What remained was endurance. The wind shifted hard from the north, rattling the single strong fence line that marked the edge of his land. Thomas listened, not with fear, but with discernment. Animals always knew before men did. Down by the shed, his old dog, Rusty, had gone still. Not barking, not pacing, just watching the storm with the quiet wisdom of a creature that sensed both danger and protection at the same time. Thomas lifted the lantern from its hook. The light was small, disciplined, steady, enough to move forward, not enough to waste. He had learned long ago that leadership in winter wasn't about force. It was about consistency, one step, then another, even when clarity slipped like frost across old wooden boards. The oak tree near the field bent under the snow, branches heavy but unbroken. Thomas paused, gloved hand resting against its bark. Legacy endured like that, he thought. Not loud, not fast, rooted, waiting. Inside his chest, something tightened. Not fear, but memory. Christmas Eve. Another one alone. Simplicity had once been a choice. Lately, it felt like the only thing the storm hadn't taken yet. He whispered a quiet prayer, not for rescue, not for comfort, but for focus, for the inner strength to finish what the day demanded, for the discipline to hold his ground until morning. Then the wind howled harder, the power cut. Darkness swallowed the house, and somewhere beyond the fence line, something broke. Thomas didn't move at first. Leadership, he knew, often began with stillness, with listening, with choosing integrity over impulse. Only later would he understand that this storm was not there to take something from him, but to return something he had almost forgotten. But it didn't start there. We must go back a little in time. 3 weeks earlier, winter had arrived without drama. It came the way most lasting things did in rural Pennsylvania, quietly, with discipline rather than force. The mornings turned sharp. The soil stiffened beneath Thomas Bennett's boots. Breath rose in pale clouds as predictable as the sun lifting over the eastern ridge. Thomas woke before daylight, as he always had. Routine was his first form of stewardship. Coffee, boots, coat. The lantern lit not because he needed it, but because he respected the rhythm of preparation. Discipline without direction was just motion. But discipline anchored to purpose carried a man through long seasons. Outside, the curved path from the house to the barn was still visible then, pressed into the ground by years of faithful steps. Thomas followed it with the calm focus of someone who understood that clarity was rarely dramatic. It was earned through consistency. The old oak stood watch near the field, its trunk wide, bark split by decades of weather. Thomas paused there each morning, resting a hand against it, not out of superstition but gratitude. Some things survived because they were meant to teach patience. The fence line along the north pasture needed attention. A section leaned slightly, weakened by last year's thaw. Thomas noted it without frustration. Leadership, he believed, was the willingness to notice small problems before they demanded heroic solutions. Rusty followed him at a distance, tail low, ears alert. Animals mirrored the state of the land, and sometimes the soul. Calm day, honest work. Thomas fed the cattle, checked the water troughs, adjusted the rope on the gate. Each motion carried intention. There was no rush, yet no wasted time. Simplicity wasn't absence, it was alignment. Inside the house later that morning, the radio murmured news of shortages, travel warnings, and early storms up north. Thomas turned it off. Not denial, discernment. His responsibility was here. His direction was narrow by design. On the kitchen table sat a folded letter he hadn't opened yet, postmarked from Ohio. His daughter, Emily. He knew her handwriting the way a man knows a scar, familiar, distant, tender. He didn't open it right away. Christmas had a way of stirring things that needed the right moment. That evening, mist lifted slowly from the field as the sun dropped low, painting the horizon with pale gold. Thomas stood at the window, hands wrapped around a warm mug, feeling a sense of clarity settle over him. Not excitement, not certainty, just peace. He bowed his head in a quiet prayer of gratitude for another day of work, for strength enough for tomorrow, for purpose that did not demand applause. At that moment, winter still felt manageable. He didn't yet know how deeply the storm would test his direction or how much simplicity would be asked of him before Christmas arrived. Thomas Bennett never dreamed of more land, more money, or an easier life. His long-term vision had always been simpler and heavier than that. He wanted the place to outlast him, not as property, but as proof. Proof that a man could live with integrity, tend what was entrusted to him, and leave behind stability instead of noise. That vision had taken shape years earlier, on a winter evening much like this one. He sat alone at the small kitchen table, a seed bag open beside him, counting slowly, methodically. Outside, snow fell without urgency. Inside, the house held the quiet memory of laughter that no longer lived there. His wife, Margaret, had believed deeply in intentional living. Purpose, she used to say, is choosing what to protect. Thomas still protected things: the land, the animals, the fence lines, the habits that built character when no one was watching. Stewardship wasn't glamorous, but it was faithful. And faithfulness, he believed, carried its own kind of wisdom. That night, he bowed his head, not out of ritual, but need. His prayer was simple, spoken under his breath, barely more than a thought. Help me keep this place steady. Help me lead it well. No thunder answered, no voice, just a deep sense of focus settling in his chest, like still water finding its level. Insight arrived in silence, the way it often did with God's timing. His dream was not escape, it was continuity. He imagined Emily one day walking the curved path again, boots crunching in the snow the way they used to when she was a child. He imagined the oak tree still standing, the fence straight, the house warm, not as a monument to him, but as evidence that responsibility, carried patiently, could shape a life. That dream required emotional maturity, letting go of urgency, accepting that leadership often meant planting seeds he might never see harvested. Simplicity demanded restraint, not lack of ambition. As Christmas approached, Thomas felt the weight of that dream more clearly, not as pressure, but as direction. Discipline had shaped his days, but now it was purpose that guided them. He placed the seed bag back on the shelf, extinguished the lantern, and stood by the window. The horizon glowed faintly beyond the fields, a promise not of ease, but of clarity. Whatever winter brought, he would meet it with the same resolve, not because he was strong, but because he had chosen to be steady. And soon, that steadiness would be tested. The first thing to fail was not the fence. It was Thomas Bennett's clarity. Winter tightened its grip earlier than expected. The soil froze hard, resisting the plow like a closed fist. Morning chores took longer. Gloves stiffened with ice. The rope at the gate dragged heavier each day, its fibers rough against his palm, as if discipline itself had grown tired. Thomas still woke before dawn, still followed the curved path, still fed the animals with care. But something inside him began to slip, not dramatically, not all at once. Purpose eroded quietly, the way frost crept beneath old boards. Fatigue settled into his bones, not just physical, but mental. Strategic thinking required energy, and energy was thinning. Decisions that once felt clear now demanded effort. Leadership, he realized, wasn't lost in failure. It was lost in weariness. One morning, he noticed a section of fence sagging farther than before. He stood there longer than necessary, staring at it, calculating, delaying. Not avoidance, just hesitation. Discipline was still present, but direction felt blurred. The wind cut across the field, sharp and unrelenting. It carried a sound that unsettled him, metal tapping against wood. He followed it to the north pasture. A fence post had loosened, the wire pulling free, not broken yet, but close. Thomas leaned on his shovel, breath visible, chest tight. Integrity always required maintenance, and maintenance demanded strength he felt slipping. That evening, inside the house, he sat with his coat still on, lantern lit but ignored. The letter from Emily lay unopened on the table. Christmas decorations stayed in their box, not out of bitterness, but because effort now felt expensive. He closed his eyes. A quiet prayer formed, weaker than before. "Give me enough for tomorrow." The answer did not come as comfort, only the sound of wind against the walls. The storm was approaching, not just outside, but within. Rusty whined softly near the door, sensing the shift. Animals always did. Later that night, Thomas woke to the sound of ice cracking somewhere beyond the barn. He lay still, staring into the darkness, aware of a truth he hadn't wanted to face. Inner strength, like land, could not be neglected without consequence. Winter had begun to test not his skill, but his resolve. And the real storm had not yet arrived. The storm announced itself 2 days later, but the injustice arrived first. Thomas Bennett was tightening the loose fence wire when the sound of tires cut across the frozen quiet. A dark pickup rolled to a stop near the gate, its engine idling with unnecessary confidence. Thomas straightened slowly, already sensing the disturbance before the door opened. Mark Caldwell stepped out. Caldwell wore a clean coat and a practiced smile. He owned land south of the ridge, recently purchased, aggressively expanded. A man known for strategic thinking without stewardship. Clever, restless, always measuring what could be taken rather than what should be protected. "Morning, Thomas," Caldwell said, eyes scanning the fence line instead of the man. "Winter's hitting harder than expected." Thomas nodded. "Winter does what it does." Caldwell smiled thinly. "That fence of yours, north side, looks tired. Hard season to keep things tight." Thomas felt the pressure beneath the words. A test disguised as concern. Over the next minutes, Caldwell spoke carefully about snow forecasts, about feed prices rising, about how inconvenient it would be if livestock wandered during a storm. Then he offered it. "I could help," Caldwell said. "I'm reinforcing my lines anyway. Could shift this boundary a touch. Temporary, of course. No paperwork, just practical." The offer carried convenience, relief, an easy solution in a hard season. Thomas looked at the fence, at the frozen ground, at the sky thickening with grey. Discipline alone urged rest, but integrity demanded resistance. "That fence is where it belongs," Thomas said quietly. Caldwell's smile tightened. "You sure? Winters like this, men make adjustments." "Not that one," Thomas replied. The first escalation came that night. The wind rose suddenly, howling through the valley. Snow followed, heavy and fast. Near midnight, Rusty barked sharply. Thomas pulled on his coat and grabbed the lantern. The fence post was down, not snapped by weather, but pulled free. Wire twisted deliberately, the boundary compromised. Thomas stood there, lantern shaking slightly in the wind. He understood. Caldwell had acted, betting winter would force silence. The second escalation came the next morning. Caldwell returned, calm, almost sympathetic. "Shame about the fence," he said. "Storms don't respect lines. We can straighten it out later." Thomas met his eyes. "You moved it. Caldwell shrugged. Weather moves everything. For a moment, Thomas felt the weight of exhaustion press hard. He could accept the shift, avoid conflict, survive the storm. Discipline whispered surrender, but leadership demanded something else. Integrity cost him more than convenience ever could. "That fence goes back today," Thomas said. Caldwell laughed softly. "In this weather, you'll lose more than wire, old man." Thomas said nothing. He picked up the hammer. Snow thickened. Wind roared. The storm began in earnest, and Thomas Bennett chose to stand where the line belonged, alone, cold, steady, knowing full well that moral courage often invites suffering before it brings clarity. Winter had drawn its boundary, so had he. The storm did not favor anyone. By nightfall, the wind had turned violent, driving snow sideways across the fields. Visibility collapsed into white chaos. Thomas Bennett retreated indoors only after resetting the fence as best he could, hands numb, rope stiff with ice, every movement costing more than it should have. He did not celebrate his stand. Integrity rarely felt victorious in the moment. It simply felt heavy and necessary. Across the ridge, Mark Caldwell did what he always did. He pushed forward. He had expanded too fast, stretched his operations thin, betting on control instead of stewardship. His new fencing, hastily installed weeks earlier, had not been anchored deep. Cleverness had replaced patience, speed had replaced wisdom. Sometime after midnight, the storm shifted direction. The wind came hard from the west, slamming into Caldwell's south-facing slope. Snow piled fast. Hosts leaned, then failed. One line went down, then another. Livestock panicked, sensing danger long before Caldwell did. By morning, his land was chaos. Animals scattered, equipment buried. A section of fencing collapsed into a drift so deep it swallowed the wire whole. Caldwell stood in the wreckage, shouting orders no one could hear, his voice lost to the wind. Thomas watched from his porch, lantern unlit, hands wrapped around a warm mug. Not with satisfaction, not with judgment, only with a quiet, sober understanding. Character outlasts cleverness. He did not go to Caldwell's land. He did not speak of what had happened. The storm had delivered its own verdict, fair, impersonal, exact. Later that day, the wind eased slightly. Thomas stepped out to check his animals. Rusty moved calmly at his side. The fence line held, scarred, bent, but standing. Boundaries maintained by consistency endured what ambition could not. Inside, Thomas bowed his head in gratitude, not because he had been spared, but because he had not compromised. He felt no triumph, only peace. Winter had stripped away illusions, revealing a simple truth. Leadership did not require winning. It required standing still long enough for truth to reveal itself, and the storm was not finished yet, but its purpose was becoming clearer. The storm reached its peak just before dawn. Snow lay thick across the land, heavy and silent, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Thomas Bennett had not slept. He sat near the window, lantern beside him, listening, not anxiously, but attentively. Leadership in moments like this required presence more than action. Then it happened, a sudden wind shift, not louder, not violent, just different. The howling eased, turned, softened. Snow stopped driving sideways and began to fall straight down, gently, deliberately. Thomas stood slowly, heart steady but alert. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The horizon to the east began to glow. Gold pushed through gray, thin at first, then stronger. The storm was breaking, and with it came an unexpected sound, a low, calm movement near the barn. Thomas grabbed his coat and moved carefully along the curved path, boots crunching through fresh snow. Rusty trotted ahead, tail relaxed. No panic, no urgency, just quiet assurance. Inside the barn, he found it. One of the younger cows had gone down during the night, trapped by cold and exhaustion. But she was alive, breathing steady, eyes calm, not panicked, protected. Thomas worked without haste, gloves on, ropes secure, movements disciplined and practiced. He spoke softly, not to command, but to reassure. Strength guided by gentleness, leadership shaped by care. As he lifted her, the cow stood slowly, shakily, then steadied herself. Steam rose from her back in the cold air. She shook once, firmly, then lowered her head to the hay as if nothing had happened. Thomas stepped back, breath catching in his chest. Outside, the storm fully released its grip. The wind rested. The snow glistened. The horizon burned with a clean golden light that stretched across the fields, touching the oak tree, the fence line, the house. In that stillness, insight arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, simple. Simplicity had not been what he lost this Christmas. It was what had saved him. He removed his gloves and bowed his head right there in the barn. No words rehearsed, just gratitude, just awe at divine timing that never rushed and never failed. God never arrives late. The word settled into him, not as belief, but as confirmation. At that moment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. No signal all night. Now suddenly one message from Emily: Dad, I don't know why, but I felt I should check on you. Roads are clearing. I'm coming home today, if that's okay. Thomas closed his eyes. The storm had not only protected what he feared losing, it had returned what he thought winter had taken. Peace did not arrive with noise, it arrived with light. That evening, the house was warm again, not just from the fire, but from presence. Emily's boots sat by the door, dusted with melting snow. Her laughter moved gently through the rooms, careful not to disturb the quiet that had shaped the place. Thomas watched her from the kitchen, saying little, understanding much. Outside, the old oak stood unchanged. The fence line held firm. The land rested beneath its white covering, whole and honest. Christmas peace, Thomas realized, had never lived in abundance or ease. It lived in simplicity, in boundaries kept, in purpose honored, in discipline guided by love. Leadership begins the moment a man chooses integrity. Those who plant in faith harvest clarity. Often, God strengthens a man before he blesses him. Thomas sat by the window that night, lantern dim, horizon dark but peaceful. The storm had passed, and with it the noise that once confused him. What remained was focus. What remained was gratitude. And what remained, above all, was the quiet certainty that simplicity was not something to outgrow, but something to return to, especially at Christmas.